Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The cream-colored envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of invitation that screamed money and exclusivity. I opened it at my kitchen island, coffee in hand, already knowing what it would say. Richard Sullivan cordially invites you to celebrate his retirement from Sullivan Development Corporation. Black tie required. The Metropolitan Club. Saturday, November 18th, 7 p.m. Then handwritten at the bottom in my mother's precise script. Professionals only. Best if you sit this out, Maya. This is a night for celebrating actual achievement. I read it twice. Set it down. Picked up my phone. A text from Mom was already waiting. Your brother's wife is a neurosurgeon. She'll be presenting a toast about professional excellence. It would be awkward having you there in your situation. My situation. That's what they called it. My life as a nonprofit coordinator, making $48,000 a year, living in a modest apartment in a neighborhood they wouldn't drive through. My situation of being 32, unmarried, no impressive letters after my name, no luxury car in the driveway. I typed back, understood. Another text came through, this time from my brother Derek. Mom's right. Dad's really proud of what he built. Don't make it weird by showing up and making it about your feelings. I didn't respond to that one. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up a file I'd been maintaining for 3 years. A file labeled Sullivan Development Investment Portfolio. Inside were loan agreements, equity positions, cash flow statements, and restructuring plans. All of it tied to a Cayman Islands trust called Meridian Capital Holdings. All of it controlled by me. My father had no idea that the angel investor, who'd saved his company from bankruptcy in 2022, was his disappointing daughter. The one who never understood business. The one who settled for nonprofit work because she couldn't handle the real world. I picked up my phone and called my wealth management attorney. Marcus, it's Maya. I need you to prepare withdrawal documents for the Sullivan Development loan. Full amount. I want them ready by Saturday night. The story really begins 4 years ago when I was 28 and working at a small nonprofit focused on financial literacy for underserved communities. My salary was modest, but I didn't need much. I'd always been good with money, careful, strategic. What my family never knew was that I'd started investing at 16 with money from my grandmother, my mother's mother, who'd passed away when I was 15. She left me $50,000 with a note. For Maya only. She has the mind for this. Don't let them tell you otherwise. My parents told everyone the inheritance went into a college fund. They never asked what actually happened to it. By the time I graduated college, I'd turned that $50,000 into $340,000 through careful index fund investments and a few very lucky early bets on emerging tech companies. By 25, I had $1.2 million. By 28, I had $8.7 million. I lived quietly, worked at the nonprofit because I genuinely believed in the mission, and invested with the precision of someone who'd spent years studying markets while my family dismissed me at every dinner table conversation about real careers. Then came Thanksgiving 2021. Dad's company, Sullivan Development, was struggling. I heard him on the phone in his study, voice tight with stress, talking about cash flow problems and creditor pressure. Sullivan Development built mid-range commercial properties. Office parks, retail centers, mixed-use developments. It was solid work, but Dad had overextended during the pandemic and the company was hemorrhaging money. At dinner that night, Derek asked, "How bad is it, Dad?" Dad waved him off. "Nothing I can't handle. Just need to restructure some things. Find the right investor." Mom looked at me then, her expression almost pitying. "This is why business requires a certain kind of mind, Maya. The pressure, the strategic thinking. Not everyone has it." Derek's wife Jennifer, the neurosurgeon, nodded sympathetically. Different people have different strengths. Maya's very good with helping people. I smiled. I am. What I didn't say was that I'd already run the numbers on Sullivan Development. The company wasn't dying. It was just poorly capitalized and badly managed through the pandemic downturn. With $50 million in restructuring capital and competent financial oversight, it could be profitable again within 2 years. I spent the next 3 weeks conducting due diligence through a private investment firm I'd quietly retained. I reviewed every contract, every asset, every liability. Sullivan Development was salvageable, but it needed someone who actually understood capital structure. In January 2022, my attorney contacted Dad's attorney with an offer. $95 million in debt financing through a Cayman Islands trust called Meridian Capital Holdings. The terms were generous. Low interest, flexible repayment, minimal oversight requirements. The only conditions were that the loan remain confidential and that Sullivan Development provide quarterly financial reports to the trust. Dad's attorney called it a miracle. Dad never questioned who Meridian Capital was or why they'd take such a favorable position. He was too relieved. I watched from my nonprofit office as my father's company stabilized, restructured, and began growing again. I reviewed every quarterly report, every financial decision. When Dad made poor choices, I had Marcus quietly suggest better alternatives through trust recommendations. For 3 years I was the silent hand keeping my father's legacy alive. And for 3 years he continued dismissing me at every family gathering. My brother Derek was everything I wasn't. Harvard MBA, McKinsey consultant before moving to private equity, married to Jennifer who'd graduated top of her class at Johns Hopkins Medical School. They lived in a brownstone in Lincoln Park with their 2 perfect children. At family dinners, Derek held court. "We're looking at a Series B investment in a healthcare AI startup," he'd say, and Dad would lean forward, asking intelligent questions, proud of his son who understood real business. When Derek spoke, people listened. When I spoke, people checked their phones. Last Christmas, I'd mentioned that our nonprofit had helped 2,400 families avoid predatory loans through our financial education program. Mom had smiled vaguely and said, "That's nice, dear," before turning to Jennifer to ask about her latest surgery. The same night, Derek announced he'd closed a $30 million deal. Dad actually stood up and hugged him, eyes glistening. "That's my boy. That's the Sullivan instinct for business." I'd excused myself to the bathroom and reviewed my investment portfolio on my phone. My personal net worth had crossed $47 million the week before. The Sullivan Development loan was performing exactly as projected. I didn't say anything. I never did. There was a certain freedom in being underestimated. People told you things when they thought you were harmless. They made strategic mistakes when they assumed you didn't understand the game. I'd learned more about business by being invisible than Derek had learned at Harvard. Dad announced his retirement in September. He was 65, ready to step back, ready to hand Sullivan Development over to Derek. There would be a celebration, he said. A proper send-off. Everyone who mattered would be there. The invitation arrived 6 weeks later with that handwritten note from Mom. I wasn't surprised. I'd been excluded before. The previous year they'd had a family investment summit at a resort in Aspen where Dad, Derek, and several cousins discussed wealth management strategies. I wasn't invited. Mom said it would be over my head. What they didn't know was that I'd been managing more capital than all of them combined. But the retirement dinner felt different. This wasn't just another slight. This was Dad's crowning moment, the celebration of everything he'd built, and I wasn't welcome because I was an embarrassment to the family narrative. I sat with that invitation for 3 days. Then I made my decision. I called Marcus on Thursday morning. "I want to attend the retirement dinner. And I want to exercise the loan recall provision." Marcus was silent for a moment. "Maya, are you certain? Once we trigger the recall, the full amount becomes due in 30 days. If Sullivan Development can't pay, they can't pay," I said calmly. "The company's current liquid assets are approximately $12 million. They'd need to sell major holdings or find replacement financing, which, given their current debt ratios, would be nearly impossible." "This will destroy your father's retirement," Marcus said carefully. "My father doesn't think I understand business," I replied. "I'm going to show him exactly how well I understand it." Marcus prepared the documents. A formal notice of loan recall, citing the provision in our original agreement that allowed Meridian Capital to demand full repayment with 30 days' notice. It was standard language that Dad's attorneys had barely glanced at 3 years ago when they were desperate for capital. I also had Marcus prepare a second set of documents, proof of my identity as the beneficial owner of Meridian Capital Holdings, complete with every transaction, every decision, every quarterly report I'd reviewed. On Friday I went shopping. I bought a dress that cost more than my monthly rent. Black, elegant, perfectly tailored. I bought shoes that whispered money. I had my hair done at a salon where Jennifer got hers done, where a wash and style cost $300. When I looked in the mirror Saturday evening, I saw someone my family wouldn't recognize. I saw the woman who'd been running the numbers behind their success all along. The Metropolitan Club was exactly what I expected. Soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, old money dripping from every surface. I walked in at 7:15 fashionably late and handed my invitation to the host. He looked at it, looked at me and nodded. Right this way, Ms. Sullivan. The ballroom was packed. 200 people, maybe more. Dad's colleagues, business partners, family, friends. Derek and Jennifer stood near the bar, both of them dressed impeccably, both of them radiating success. I spotted my parents at the center table, Dad in a tuxedo, Mom in a gown that probably cost $5,000. They were laughing with the mayor and his wife. Nobody noticed me at first. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and found a spot along the wall, observing. The speeches started at 7:30. The mayor went first, praising Dad's contributions to the city's commercial development. Then came Dad's business partner telling stories about their early days. Then Derek, giving a polished presentation about the Sullivan legacy of excellence and strategic vision. Nobody mentioned that the company had nearly collapsed 3 years ago. Nobody mentioned the mysterious investor who'd saved everything. I sipped my champagne and waited. At 8:15, Dad stood to give his speech. He thanked everyone, his voice thick with emotion. He talked about building something that mattered, about legacy, about passing the torch to his son who had the mind and the drive to take Sullivan Development to new heights. He never mentioned me. Not once. Then his phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. I saw his attorney Richard Chin stand from a table near the back. He was checking his phone, his face draining of color. He started walking quickly toward Dad. This was the moment. Richard Chin reached the head table just as Dad was concluding his speech. I saw him lean down and whisper something urgent. Dad's expression shifted from confusion to concern. He pulled out his phone, glanced at the screen, and his face went completely pale. The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Richard, what is this? Dad's voice carried in the sudden silence. Richard cleared his throat. His voice shook slightly. Sir, I just received a notice from Meridian Capital Holdings. They're calling the loan. Full amount due in 30 days. $95 million. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dad stared at him. That's impossible. The loan isn't due until 2027. We have years left. There's a recall provision, Richard said miserably. I'm sorry, Richard. I didn't think they'd ever exercise it. But they have the right. And they're exercising it now. I watched Derek stand up, his face flushed. Who the hell is Meridian Capital? Why would they do this now? Richard looked at his phone again. They've provided documentation. The beneficial owner is. He paused, looking genuinely confused. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning faces. Then they landed on me. The beneficial owner is Maya Sullivan, he said slowly, as if he couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. Every head in the room turned. I set down my champagne glass and walked forward. My heels clicked against the marble floor. The crowd parted like water. I reached the head table and looked at my father. His face had gone from pale to red, confusion and anger competing for dominance. Maya, he said. What is he talking about? I pulled out my phone and nodded to Richard. I sent you the supporting documentation 30 minutes ago. Every transaction, every decision, every quarterly report. Meridian Capital Holdings is a Cayman trust established in 2021. I'm the sole beneficial owner. Mom stood up, her hand at her throat. That's ridiculous. You work at a nonprofit. You make $48,000 a year. I do work at a nonprofit, I said calmly, because I believe in the work. But that's not where my money comes from. Derek was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You're saying you loaned Dad $95 million? Where would you even get? I started with an inheritance from Grandma Rose when I was 16, I said. $50,000 that she left specifically to me. I invested it. By 25 I had over $1 million. By 28 I had nearly $9 million. When Dad's company was failing in 2021, I saw an opportunity. Dad finally found his voice. You've been the investor this whole time? For 3 years, I confirmed. I saved your company, Dad. When you were about to lose everything, I stepped in. I provided the capital you needed, restructured your debt, and gave you the breathing room to recover. I read every quarterly report. Every financial decision you made came across my desk. Jennifer had gone completely still. But you're just a nonprofit coordinator, I finished. Yes. Making $48,000 a year and managing a $47 million personal portfolio. Turns out I can do both. The silence in the room was absolute. Dad sank back into his chair. Why? He whispered. Why would you do this? Because you're my father, I said simply. Because I could. Because despite everything, I didn't want to see you lose what you'd built. Then why are you calling the loan now? Derek demanded. Why destroy it? I turned to look at him. Because I wasn't invited to this dinner, Derek. Because Mom sent me an invitation that said, professionals only, best if you sit this out. Because for 32 years, you've all treated me like I'm too stupid to understand business. Like I'm a failure because I chose meaningful work over impressive titles. I looked back at Dad. You just gave a speech about legacy and excellence and passing the torch to your son who has the mind and the drive. You thanked everyone who helped build Sullivan Development. Everyone except the person who actually saved it. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Paya, we didn't know. You didn't ask, I said. You never asked. You just assumed. You saw what you wanted to see. Richard Chin cleared his throat awkwardly. Miss Sullivan, the recall notice has been filed. But we could discuss alternatives? Restructuring options. I pulled out a second envelope from my purse. I've prepared 2 documents, Dad. The first is the formal loan recall. If you sign it, you have 30 days to pay the full amount. Given Sullivan Development's current assets and debt ratios, that's impossible. You'd have to liquidate major holdings or file for bankruptcy protection. I held up the second envelope. The second document transfers the loan to a new entity with revised terms. 20-year extension, interest rate reduced from 6% to 3%, and flexible repayment based on company performance. It also includes my full identity as the investor and a provision requiring Sullivan Development to acknowledge Meridian Capital's role in the company's survival. Dad stared at the envelopes. What do you want, Maya? I want you to see me, I said quietly. I want you to understand that I've been here all along, that I understand business better than you ever gave me credit for. I want you to stop treating me like I'm the family embarrassment. I set both envelopes on the table. You have until midnight to decide. Sign the recall and you lose everything. Sign the revised terms and we move forward. But either way, you'll finally know who I actually am. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, the silence erupted into chaos. Voices overlapping, my mother calling my name, Derek shouting something about lawyers. I kept walking. Outside, my car was waiting. I'd hired a driver for the evening, a small indulgence. As I slid into the back seat, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. That was quite a show. Are you all right? I typed back. I'm fine. Let me know what they decide. Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. This is Richard Chin, your father's attorney. He'd like to meet tomorrow morning. Just you and him. Can we arrange that? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I replied, 9 a.m. My office at the nonprofit. He can come to me. Dad arrived at exactly 9 a.m. I watched from my office window as he got out of his car, looking older somehow, diminished. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring at the building, a modest 3-story structure in a neighborhood he'd probably never visited. When he walked into my office, he looked around like he was seeing me for the first time. The desk with my dual monitors showing market data. The bookshelf filled with investment texts and economic theory. The framed credentials on the wall. Chartered financial analyst, certified financial planner, master's in finance from Northwestern that I'd completed online while working full-time. Credentials I'd never mentioned at family dinners because no one ever asked about my education. You got a master's degree, he said finally. 3 years ago, I replied. Online program. Graduated top of my class. He sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I signed the revised terms, he said quietly. This morning. Richard witnessed it. I nodded. I'd expected that. The alternative was suicide for his company. Why didn't you tell us? He asked. Why let us think? Why let us believe you were struggling? I wasn't struggling, I said. I was living within my means and building something that mattered. The nonprofit work is real, Dad. We've helped thousands of families avoid predatory loans, taught financial literacy, created pathways out of poverty. That work matters to me. But the money is just numbers on a screen, I said. It's a tool. I'm good at making it grow and I use it strategically. But it's not who I am. Dad rubbed his face. He looked exhausted. Your mother is devastated. Derek is. I don't even know what Derek is. Confused. Angry maybe. Angry that I'm not what they thought I was? I asked. Or angry that they were wrong? Maybe both. He looked at me directly. I owe you an apology, Maya. A massive one. I treated you like you didn't matter. Like your choices were somehow less valid than Derek's. I dismissed you at every turn. You did, I agreed. I don't know how to make that right. I leaned back in my chair. You can start by actually seeing me. Not as the family failure or the nonprofit girl or the disappointment. Just see me as I actually am. A financial genius who saved my company, he said with a bitter laugh. A woman who loves her work, understands markets and happens to be very good with money, I corrected. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Dad was quiet for a moment. Then, the revised loan terms are very generous. More generous than I deserve. They're fair, I said. They ensure Sullivan Development stays solvent while allowing me to maintain appropriate oversight of my investment. It's good business. It's mercy. It's both. He stood up slowly. Will you come to Sunday dinner? Your mother would like to talk to you. Derek too, probably once he stops being shell-shocked. I considered it. I'll come. But things are different now, Dad. I'm not going to sit quietly while you all discuss real careers and actual achievement anymore. You don't have to celebrate my work, but you do have to respect it. Fair enough, he said. He walked to the door, then paused. Your grandmother would be proud of you. Rose always said you had something special. I should have listened to her. After he left, I sat alone in my office for a long time. My phone had been buzzing all morning. Texts from family members, calls from numbers I didn't recognize, even a message from the mayor asking if we could schedule a meeting to discuss potential investment opportunities in civic development. But the message that made me smile came from Marcus. Several news outlets are asking about the secret investor who crashed her own father's retirement dinner. How would you like to handle the PR? I typed back, no comment. Let them wonder. Some mysteries were worth keeping. Sunday dinners are different now. Not perfect, we're still figuring out how to be a family when the power dynamics have completely shifted. But different. Derek actually asks me about market trends now. Jennifer listens when I talk about the intersection of healthcare finance and nonprofit work. Mom still struggles with the reality that her struggling daughter has more wealth than the rest of the family combined, but she's trying. Dad and I meet quarterly to review Sullivan Development's performance. He's been surprisingly receptive to my suggestions, and the company is thriving under the revised capital structure. Derek is learning that being handed control isn't the same as earning it, and Dad is finally teaching him the difference. Last week, Forbes did reach out about an interview for their 30 Under 30 Finance retrospective. I declined. My work doesn't need that kind of publicity, and honestly, I don't need the validation. But I did accept when the nonprofit asked me to lead a new financial literacy initiative for young women, teaching them about investing, wealth building, and the power of quiet confidence in a world that often mistakes silence for weakness. The program launches next month. We're calling it the Rose Sullivan Initiative, after my grandmother. Because she saw something in me that my family missed, and I want other young women to know that their worth isn't measured by how loud they are or how much they impress people at dinner parties. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. I learned that lesson well. And I'm teaching it to the next generation.